2007, it seemed that nearly every publisher was starting to push hard for games focusing on a multiplayer experience, whether MMORPGs or big-budget shooters with ranks and unlocks at every turn. While many of these releases did have single-player campaigns, they often felt secondary to the main draw of going head-to-head or side-by-side with buddies online. Into this market, 2K Games dropped a little bombshell called BioShock. A single-player game that didn't bother with the online or split-screen features, not even as a tacked-on afterthought to the primary solitaire experience. Not only that, but the game's campaign didn't even try to compete with popular franchises such as Call of Duty in terms of over-the-top scripted set pieces or teeth-rattling action sequences. Instead, the developers chose a more subtle approach. They built a living, breathing world called Rapture, whose story was only told through glimpses of the crumbling vestiges of its twisted populace and smoky piles of rubble. The ripples of BioShock's massive impact on the industry can still be felt today, as it contributed to the resurgence of the solitaire video game. While its sequel BioShock 2 did include multiplayer, the series is known primarily for creating breathtaking worlds which allow the player freedom of choice in how he or she approaches its many puzzles and challenges. Now, BioShock is poised to take a great leap skyward as Irrational and 2K prepare to release BioShock Infinite around the world this week. No longer will players be miles beneath the dreary waves. Now the franchise will take players to the floating city of Columbia, a utopian monument to the supposed superiority of the ideals of liberty and egalitarianism espoused by the exceptionalists during the end of the 19th century. Of course, Columbia doesn't end up fulfilling its lofty goals, and instead begins to degenerate into a hellish dystopian nightmare for its residents. Levine and the rest of the 2K team will be using the rotting framework of the once great city and its depraved citizens to explore weighty themes, such as America's historic struggles with racism, along with an exploration of xenophobia and even eugenics. Once again, it's clear that lead designer Ken Levine and his team aren't afraid to tackle philosophical subjects that most developers would deem it wise to stay away from. While part of the draw and the intrigue of each BioShock game is unraveling the world's mysteries as the game goes, 2K has revealed many of the basic plot elements through interviews and gameplay trailers. Players will take on the role of Booker, a rogue detective hired to track down a missing girl named Elizabeth held aboard the Columbia. But the seemingly simple story promises to ramp up in intensity and chaos as the game goes on, introducing rival factions, bizarre supernatural elements, and even time travel. With all these blending together, gamers should be in for a wild ride that challenges the conventions of the shooter and action genres in ways we didn't think were possible. And as usual, Levine has a mind-blowing reveal in store for the second half of the game, twisting players' perception of the game world permanently. Though the storyline and setting share nothing in common with the previous games, BioShock Infinite will carry over many of its predecessors' mechanics in terms of gameplay. Like the first two games, Infinite will place heavy emphasis on player choice in its combat systems, putting the decision of which weapons, abilities, equipment, and powers to use and which to leave behind in the hands of gamers. In fact, Infinite will go even further in its implications of player choice, as upgrades and abilities often cannot be reversed, allowing players to see the impact their selections had on the way the story unfolded near the end of the game. Other significant additions and changes to the standard BioShock formula include the Skyline, a system of rails used for soaring around Columbia, a network that will be featured heavily in the game's big set-piece moments. The developers also claim the system will allow for new combat tactics we haven't seen before in any first-person shooter. The character's rescue target, Elizabeth, will also factor into the gameplay, as the developers have designed her to behave as a realistic companion through the non-scripted combat sequences and other challenges you'll have to face. Bigger and badder boss fights, a more fully realized morality matrix, and dynamic enemy AI systems will also be prominent in the game's unique vision of just what a first-person shooter can do in the 21st century. If BioShock 2 was a marginal improvement on the first game's technology, Infinite ought to be leaps and bounds ahead of either game. With the all-new Unreal 3 engine in place of the previous game's souped-up Unreal 2 incarnation, BioShock Infinite's depiction of the city of Columbia looks to be nothing short of stunning, if previous gameplay footage is any indication. Packing more detailed textures, greater draw distances, more advanced animation systems, and state-of-the-art lighting and shading technology, the game will make every attempt to make Columbia come alive on screen. And in an attempt to reach the growing computer games market, DirectX 11 integration and higher resolution textures will be available to PC gamers with powerful enough machines. As with any game, we can't know whether BioShock Infinite can deliver on the sky-high expectation the developers have set for themselves until we finally get to dig into what it has to offer. Whether the outlandish story, unique setting, and attempted gameplay innovation are able to create a masterpiece remains to be seen. But if any developer can get us to sit up and pay attention to their lofty claims, it's Irrational Games because of their outstanding pedigree. We'll know whether BioShock Infinite makes the grade when it hits stores and download services tomorrow, March 26th. We'll see you in the skies.